Hey everyone, this is Frances Caballo with Social Media Just for Writers, and I have Penny Sanseveri with us today. Say hi, Penny.
Hi.
I am so happy to have Penny. I'm going to read her bio, and then and while I'm doing that, you can listen, but you can also write your name and where you're from if you feel open enough. And then we'll go right into the webinar, and I have some questions to ask of Penny. And she said that we can interrupt her from time to time, and you can get in your questions as well. So I'll start with my questions, or actually the bio I have of Penny is just short, and then we'll see where you're from, and then we'll go right into the webinar. So Penny is an indie author herself and the CEO of Author Marketing Experts. She is a book marketing and media relations specialist. She coaches authors on projects, manuscripts, and marketing plans, and instructs a variety of courses on publishing and promotion. Her company specializes in non-traditional promotion for exceptional results. Well, we wouldn't expect anything less than that from you, Penny. So nobody yet is saying where they're from. Oh, Mike, of course. Mike Sano is from Florida. And I'm always happy to see Mike here. Does anyone else want to indicate their name and where they're from? I know there are other people out there. I'm just waiting to hear from them a little bit. From Colorado, Inara Reynolds from Colorado. I know I received a message from someone from Europe today, and it's midnight where she's at, and so she is going to catch us on the replay.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So we have Mike, we have Inara, we have KL from Kelly Leonard, and you're from Chappaqua, New York.
Kelly, hi.
Yeah. Darlene Miller is from California. And Penny says, oh, KL says, hi, Penny.
Hi.
And Carol Sundstrom is from Vancouver. And Vancouver, Washington. As if there were any other. And that's all we have for now. So I think I'm just going to go right into the questions instead of waiting for more people to type. So let's get right into this, Penny.
Okay.
So tell us about some of the book selling strategies that you often suggest to some of your clients.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me to be on this webinar. I'm so excited, and I love your audience first off, Frances, because you have such an awesome group of authors that follow you. So book selling strategies, that's an interesting question because it varies depending on the book title, the book genre, the author goals, things like that. But the things that what we know is that 95% of books are sold word of mouth. So while ads and all of that stuff is fine, I wouldn't necessarily put all my eggs in the ad basket. Right? So I would look at doing things like getting reviews. And I'll tell you something, the number one thing, and I just did a predictions blog post for 2018, and the number one thing that I'm recommending to authors is you got to start building your super fan base and your street teams, because there are something like 4,500 books published every day in this country. Wow. So blogger interest and top Amazon reviewer interest and national reviews in magazines and newspapers is diminishing because of the competition, right? And even though that number is staggering, 99% of those authors don't market their books. I know that sounds like a really vastly overstated number, but right. Frances, you and I teach a lot of writers' conferences, and we know that there is a good measure of authors that publish their books that think that it is the field of dreams, that just because they wrote it, people are going to beat a path to their door. It's right. The authors that sit on calls like this and read your information and read all about marketing, they're the 1% that are actually out there doing it and killing it and doing the work. But the problem is that number of books still clogs the funnel. So you've got to turn to your fan base and your super fan base to get them to review books. Because I know some authors that have mailing lists, and they don't have to be big numbers, right? I know one author, she has 200 people on her mailing list, but they're all crazy in love with everything she does.
Right.
and she'll launch a book and almost immediately get 100 reviews on Amazon from these
Wow.
readers. That's the thing that you want, and that's what authors are going to need going forward. And I don't care what genre you're in, super fans can make or break you.
So how do you build that fan base? Because everybody always comes to me and asks me, well, how do I get more reviews? Well, how do they get more fans?
Well, the first piece of it is fans got to have to have a way to contact you, and since so many books are sold on Amazon, you've got to put a letter in the back of your book. And I talk about this a lot in my seminars. And I actually did a test on this in terms of putting a letter in the back of the book, and then I gave the book away for free using an ebook deal, and just to kind of see what response I would get. There was a book that I read called The Curve, which talked about how you only need 500 superfans to get on the 1,000 superfans, excuse me, to get on the New York Times bestseller list. And if you think about the definition of a superfan, they're crazy for absolutely everything that you do. So that number really makes sense because one person is telling 5 or 10 of their friends. And so your numbers are exponentially greater than just whatever your mailing list numbers are. So start by giving fans a way to contact you. So first thing is you got to bring them in. So put the letter in the back of the book and incentivize them. So ask them for their opinion on your book, or ask them to contact you, or whatever they want to say. And not every opinion that you get on the book is going to be fantastic, right? So when we did this example, I would say 85% of people really loved the book. Some people didn't, and they said why. And I think that's also helpful information as long as it's presented in a productive way. Not like, I hated all your characters. That's not really very helpful, right? Once you get those people contacting you and inviting them into your world, the next step is to add them to your newsletter and start to communicate with them on a regular basis. And in so doing, you're going to invite them to participate in things like, help me figure out what to do with this character in my next book, or give me a sense of what you want to see in my books. Let's say if you've written nonfiction, right? Help me pick a cover. Really involve them. Make them feel like they own your books as much as you do, right? And then give them special things, like they get first access to a book. So if a book is on pre-order on Amazon, they get it 2 weeks before it launches, or they get a free book, or whatever, right? They get your exclusive, let's say, BOGO deal, buy one, get one. So they buy one of your books and they can gift one to a friend for the around the holidays, or whatever that is. Make them feel exclusive. It's that whole kind of, when they have that exclusivity of getting into a private club or something, and all of the fun little perks and benefits from that. And you will grow that. And as I said, you don't need big numbers, because I know some authors that have 50 people on their list and others that have just 200. And most people, I would think, that are sitting on this call probably are sitting in, in the smaller numbers as opposed to 10 and 20,000. Some may, but it's really it's a fantastic way to bring them in and get those reviews and really keep the momentum going in your books.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Really good advice. And I think it is important to help our readers feel like they're getting an exclusive by getting on our list.
Absolutely.
They're getting something special. And I think the idea is giving them a copy of the book 2 weeks before it goes off of pre-sale is a really great idea.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other things, like we've done swag bags, and we've done, other fun exclusive things so they get like a membership tote. And you can get these totes so inexpensively on sites like Zazzle that are doing promos almost every day with 30% off and 50% off and all this other stuff. I've done totes for sometimes as low as $4 a tote, and that's a really inexpensive thing to give somebody, because then they're walking around with your URL on the tote, because you're going to brand it and make it your own. It doesn't cost anything to do that. So there's a lot of really inexpensive things that people can do. And what's interesting is I had a conversation with an author yesterday, and he published back in the 80s, right? Before all of this craziness kind of started, and all social media and everything video and all this other stuff. And he said, I was getting in a car and I was driving from bookstore to bookstore to do events. And then I was getting on a plane and I was going across the country to do all these events. And he said, things seem like it's harder now because there's so much more competition. It seems like it's so much harder to connect with readers, but it's really so much easier because we have all these tools at our disposal. The
Right.
problem is that most of us aren't using them. We're using them to kind of, share information out there, but we're not using them to create a personal connection with the reader, which is really what we should be doing. And that's, as you know, Francis, that's so much easier to do now with social media.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. So tell us why focusing on a book launch is so important.
Well, the book launch, so I come at this from an Amazon algorithm thing, right? And I think that book launches are very important, but you don't want to put all your eggs into, just that one sort of week of the book launch, because the most successful books are ones that are promoted for the long term. But the book launch is important because it does matter to your Amazon algorithm. So right out of the gate, and this is particularly true for any author who's doing a pre-order. Pre-orders on Amazon seem super fun and sexy and, oh, my book is up for pre-order, and that seems great. But here's the problem. So they'll do the pre-order, and then the pre-order goes live, and then nothing happens with the book. So there are no reviews, nobody's really buying it, and that actually can damage your Amazon algorithm for up to 3 months.
Oh, wow.
So if you don't have a mailing list, if you don't have super fans, if you don't have something in place to get some reviews up on Amazon quickly, you really want to rethink that whole pre-order thing. It's less severe if you launch a book on Amazon and you don't get reviews immediately, but it's still so much better for your book because you can sit on that new release list so much longer if your book is getting, reviewed. And typically, if I'm sending out galley copies to my readers and asking for a review, I'm usually telling them, you know what, I know you're getting this 2 weeks ahead of time, you have plenty of time to read it, but wait 48 hours before reviewing it on Amazon, just because, the Amazon gods, we don't want them to pull the book off of there thinking that we did something weird to it, right? But the interesting thing is that I've actually had situations where reviews have appeared almost instantaneously to the book being launched on Amazon, and it's never been a problem. So Amazon's very squirrely about that. Like sometimes they get really upset and other times they couldn't care less. So they're very moody that way. I hope they're not listening, but they're very moody that way.
Oh, we have Linda Acaster from England on with us today.
Hi, Linda. Welcome.
Yeah. So do you ever relaunch books? And if you do, what's your strategy?
Oh, I love relaunching books. So, and I'm actually putting together a little book on, how to relaunch a book, because so many times we have books that maybe we published 5 years ago, and we think, I know so much more about book marketing now than I did 5 years ago, and I wish I knew now what I knew then. Why not relaunch the book? And even better, so I ran into an author maybe a year ago at a big writers conference, and he said to me, he says, I have this 400-page science fiction book, and it's really good, but I launched it 6 years ago, whatever, and I knew nothing about the market, and it's done really nothing. It has 5 sad little reviews on the book, and I have nothing, there's nothing going on. So I'm wondering if I can relaunch that book. And I said, I'll take you one better than that. Not only will you relaunch the book, but you're going to take this 400-page book, chop it up into 4 pieces, put it up as 4 separate ebooks on Amazon, and then create the brand new 4-book bundle, right?
Wow.
Because what you're then essentially doing, and this is another Amazon strategy, is you want to own the shelf. So you want to have as many books on the shelf as you possibly can, and splitting them up when appropriate. Now, some books don't lend themselves to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in most cases, there are natural places where you can kind of end one book and start the other. And this works particularly well, obviously, in nonfiction, too. Relaunching a book is a great idea. Refreshing a cover, even if you don't do anything with the book, refreshing the cover is always great. It's also good for your Amazon algorithm, believe it or not, having a fresh new cover on there. It's weird. If the content needs to be updated slightly, you can certainly do that. But I see this so many times where an author has launched a book and sometimes something happens personally, like, a family member gets sick and they just don't have the time to invest in it, and 2 years goes by, and now it's really too late to get bloggers interested in the book. So you can relaunch it, and do what you couldn't do the first time.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I
Yeah,
like your idea of taking a really long book and slicing it and then doing a series.
yeah, I like that a lot too. And I like that also, not just because it gives people, so one of the other really good book promotion strategies is you always want to be promoting something. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do these wildly crazy, busy, aggressive campaigns. It can be, okay, so this month I'm going to do an ebook promo on this book, right? And let's say this is your first book that you have out there. It's tough to take that one book and run a discounted ebook promotion on it every single month, because then readers are going to go, well, I'm just going to keep waiting for a better price, because eventually, you know what I mean? So it's sort of like, it's this weird kind of situation that you get into with your readers. But if you have 4 books sitting up there, you can rotate them, right? So you can discount book 1, and you can discount book 2, and then book 3 and book 4. And so you're going over 4 months and 4 months, and then your books are really only seeing, you're not discounting the same book over and over again. You're just discounting it a few times a year. So that's that's another reason why you have a lot more flexibility.
Right. And series are really popular now, right? Especially box sets.
Yeah. And here's a really weird thing. There was an article in, I think it was in Forbes, that talked about how book series of books are doing vastly better than movie series. So, like the follow-on to XYZ movie series or something like that. They're finding that book series actually do so much better. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the author probably knows their reader much better than a big movie studio actually knows what their consumer wants. You know what I mean? I mean, I think that the writers have a much more intimate connection with their audience,
Yeah.
I think, anyway. So, yeah, it's definitely a great idea. And the other thing, too, is that don't think that each book in the series or each separate book has to be a full-length book, right? Novel or nonfiction book. It can be 20 or 27,000 words, and you're good to go. In fact, I know a lot of people who do novellas, and we're seeing this a lot now with Christmas novellas. So all these Hallmark-esque kind of novellas that are popping up on Amazon, they're fairly short. I mean, some of them are 63 pages long. So it's completely doable. Go through your backlist and figure out, if you were thinking, oh man, I have to have a new book to launch in next year and I haven't really had time to write the book, go through your backlist and see what you've got sitting there and, relaunch them.
It's a great idea. It's a great idea.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to check to see if there's any questions. Not yet. So know that you can send us some questions. Just go to the questions tab or the chat tab, and it'll come out under questions, and then I can ask Penny your question. So describe your most successful book launch. Was it the science fiction one?
That's a tough question, because we've worked with quite a number of books, and I think that successful varies depending on what the author, what the author goals are. Mm-hmm. I think that the most successful book launch is always the book launch that carries itself beyond the launch, right? So it's pretty easy to get excited the first 2 weeks that the book is out, or the first 3 weeks. Right. But then beyond that, it's like the bloom starts to fade off of the flower, and what am I going to do now? And what am I, So we've had situations where we had an author who sold like 17,000 books in a weekend doing an ebook promo. That's very rare, by the way. I don't want people to contact me and go, hey, I want to sell 17,000 books, because that doesn't, it's not that almost never happens, but it doesn't always happen. And that had a lot to do, not just with the work that we did with the author, but I think also with the author herself, because she also had, she did kind of promotion sort of on her own. We've set up authors with launches where they have, they get speaking engagements, and that's something that they really wanted. You got to figure out, before you start to launch your book, what are really your goals, right? So if your goal is to get a big movie deal, I would suggest to kind of realign that a little bit, because that's not really, it's not that won't happen, but a much more realistic goal might be something that is 10, 20, or maybe even 100 steps in advance of that. So getting lots of reviews, keeping your Amazon sales rank down. You know, you got to kind of figure out what your goals are. Do you want to do speaking? Is your book your business card, right? So all of these things factor in. And when those goals are aligned effectively, the campaign becomes that much more successful, because authors realize that, you know, maybe the first book is just your stepping stone, and the second, third, and fourth are the ones that are really going to kind of set the road for your success. I don't know if that really answered your question, but.
Sure. We have another question for you, and it is from Shari. And her question is, she wants to know Penny's suggestion for a post-launch to maintain sales plateau.
So, Sherry, can you answer me can you tell me what your book is about? Because this sort of varies depending on whether or not you have fiction or nonfiction too. So if you can share that with me. Generally though, with post-launch, one of the things I recommend, so it's all very exciting, as I mentioned, the first couple of weeks or even the first few months of a book launch. And then, you know, the excitement fades a little bit. You should always continue pitching bloggers for reviews. Always be going after reviews. I mean, I would actually say that's probably the #1 thing that you want to keep doing. Part of it is too, is that reviews continue to help your Amazon visibility. So think of your Amazon book page as your website, right? And, you know, SEO people will tell you if you blog regularly on your website, it'll help with your visibility in Google. Well, the same thing is true with reviews on your book page on Amazon. Amazon is just a search engine. That's all Amazon is. And Amazon responds to the same cues that Google does. So getting regular reviews on your Amazon page is going to consistently help you get more visibility there. In fact, I've tested this with a book that's 5 years old. And I said, okay, we're going to push this book to get, let's say, 50 more reviews on it, right? And right now we're up to 20, and the Amazon algorithm is really helping to kick in on this book. It's really helping to get visibility for it. So reviews absolutely help. Reader reviews, invite them, put a letter in the back of your book, continually reaching out to readers. When was the last time you got on your social media and you asked your readers for reviews? There's nothing wrong with asking for a review for your book. The other thing that you could potentially do too is speaking engagements. Roaring 20s crime fiction, that is so fun. So you could do something around maybe some kind of an anniversary, around something historic. I don't know whether your book has any sort of historical fiction element to it, but if it does, you could really kind of play off of that too, right? Have you do you do any kind of book signings? Do you do any kind of speaking events? Have you ever done character trading cards? Those are super fun. So they're basically, and I don't have any here with me right now, but they're basically just trading cards that have the characters on them and then a little description of maybe some lines from the book or a little description about them. It's a fun thing to give out, and people love to keep them. In fact, they're even better, maybe in some cases, than bookmarks. But I think continuing to, you know, go after bloggers, and after you've hit the really top bloggers, when you first, you know, out of the gate, go after some of the smaller ones too. And in fact, for those people that you didn't hear back from, try repitching them. A lot of times when we're pitching media or bloggers, I find that the bigger success comes with the second and sometimes the third repitch. So keep that in mind too. Don't give up if they don't say yes the first time.
And so we have another question, and that is from KL. What book launch or launches your campaigns are from other author publishers do you think were surprise standout from the crowd in 2017?
I think that's a great question, Kelly. I appreciate that so much. I think that the standout ones were really the ones that had, so whenever we have an author who is wildly engaged in their own success, who's just out there really killing it, those are the ones that always tend to surprise me. So we had an author who re-released a book that was historical fiction, and she was re-releasing it again. So she had already done this rodeo the first time. But now she said, you know, I know so much more, I'm so much better at this, and she really, really was. So we worked in tandem with her to get her book out there, and she got so many speaking gigs for a self-published fiction book, which was phenomenal, right? And then she really kind of beefed it up again around Halloween because it had some kind of scary paranormal element to it. And it was all set in a house. I forget the name of the house, but it was set in a house in New England. So so it was a made up story that was set in a real kind of haunted house there, and she did really well. That one really surprised me. But again, the author said to me, she said, I'm just going to really do it. I'm going to knock it out of the park. And I said, okay, here's what we're doing. What are you doing? And she was all over it. So what helps any promotion is when you have two teams kind of working to the same goal. And I think that the author that kind of hires any company, whether it's us or somebody else, and sits back and says, okay, well, send me my check for my royalties, that rarely ends well. That really rarely ends well. But that one really surprised me because, like I said, she had really not done well the first time. And then the second time she said, I'm on it. This means a lot to me. And sure enough, it did. We worked on another book also that was a coffee table book about the vice presidents. And when this guy first came to us, he said, I have this book, and it was a really aggressive project. And he self-published this book. I wish I had and here's another case. I wish I had a copy of this book in front of me because you would not believe how gorgeous this book was. Big coffee table book, all these pictures, and it was about the vice president's homes and all the history that surrounded that. This book has done unbelievable. It's been in Washington Post. The Bushes have given him an endorsement. He's gotten all kinds of vice presidents' endorsements for this book. He has done extremely well. And it's not an inexpensive book. So it's coffee table book, whatever it was, $55, $60, right? People just love this slice of American history. And he admittedly kind of like flew by the seat of his pants because he was like, I really want to do this. I've never published. I don't know anything. Tell me what I need to know. And I didn't do his publishing for him because that's not what we do. But he worked with a couple of people who helped him get a really beautiful book out there. And I think at the end of the day, this beautifully put together book almost kind of sold itself. I mean, really. And he has virtually no distribution on it, and it's self-published. So he had every strike against him, and he still did really, really well.
Wow.
Yeah. And, in an age and a year where you got to say that most Americans really hate politics, I was really surprised because I was like, oh, gosh, this is not going to end well. And he did extremely well with this book. So I think that there's a place for any book as long as it's done really well. So that was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, sounds like a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book. Yeah.
So how do you suggest that authors use social media to help support the sales of their books?
Well, I think, it's interesting, Frances, because you teach social media too. And we know that there's a lot of noise on social media that's not always productive. Right? So I think that what you need to realize with social media is it is a one-on-one conversation with your fans. And it's also, when it comes to social media, it's not about being everywhere. It's about being everywhere that matters. So pick your battles when it comes to social media. If your fans aren't on Facebook, then keep your Facebook personal page to share your vacation pictures and whatever, and go someplace where they actually are. You really want to go to where your fans are. That's a big thing. And I really recommend that you cut out the useless noise in the new year and get rid of the sites that are not productive to you. So let me give an example. We had a cookbook author a few years ago, and she was on every single social media site with the exception of YouTube. She was on YouTube. And I said to her, she says, oh, this is just exhausting and I'm not really getting a lot of fans and I don't really know what I'm doing. And I said, well, why aren't you creating videos? Like, why aren't you creating these fun little short cooking videos, And she's like, oh, I hate being on video. And I was like, oh, honey, I feel your pain. I hate being on video too. But you can actually have the camera focus on your work. The camera doesn't actually have to focus on you until you're really comfortable with that. So she started doing it. And then she took those videos and she repurposed them. So she took those videos and she put them on Pinterest, right? And then she took those videos, she put it on YouTube, and then she'd share little snippets of it on Twitter. She finally eventually got rid of Twitter, and she ended up staying largely with Pinterest and with YouTube and somewhat on Facebook, but she's done exceedingly better. And that video connection with her fans and showing them how to execute the recipes that she's creating was phenomenal. So you've really got to figure out where your sweet spot is. And one of the things that I recommend is Success Leaves Clues. So start to research other similar authors in your market. And stay away from the big brand names. Like you don't want to, like Stephen King, for example, could hop back on MySpace tomorrow. Does MySpace even still exist? I don't know, but could hop on MySpace tomorrow, and 9 million of his fans would follow him, right? So that's not you. You want to find somebody who is sort of off the radar screen, but still doing really, really well. See what they're blogging about. See what social media sites are they on. How often are they on them, right? See where they're getting the most momentum for their social media efforts, and start to invest your time there, because social media is a phenomenally great tool for authors, but most of the time we're just not doing it right. We're kind of shouting at our audience, but we're not really talking to our reader, and that's the big difference.
Right. We have another question. You are popular with questions. What are some of the key elements of an awesome book reading event?
You know what? That's a great question, Shari. I'm glad you asked that. So standing there reading your book can be great if you're good in front of a crowd. So I want to preface this by saying that I've been to book events where some authors are reading and they're very nervous, and maybe they sound a little bit too monotone, so it's not very appealing to the crowd. So if that's you, like if you don't really like to do that, I would recommend doing something else. Maybe talk to the readers, or just have a conversation about how you created the book, how you developed the characters, right? Because most authors, when they start to talk about their passion for their book project, they have no trouble talking in front of a crowd. So first off, figure out what you kind of jive with. The other thing is, I mean, depending on how extravagant you want it to get, you could even show up in costume, right? I mean, that could be really fun. I've had some authors that actually have some of their friends who want to support them doing these book events also show up in costume. So you could do something, or you could do a game with that, because again, depending on whether or not your book has historical fiction elements in it, your reader, if they are historical fiction fans, are going to really love like the 1920s Did You Knows or something like that. So you can actually make this really engaging. But the one thing that you want to remember is make sure you build your mailing list. Because these people that show up for this event, that take the time out of their evening or their afternoon to do this, they are your super fans. So make sure to get a mailing list, a sign up.
Those are good points, really good points. So not on Pinterest. You suggested for fiction? Supernatural and historicals?
So Pinterest is fun in that you can create different boards for different elements of your book, right? So you can create like a historical board for the historical elements of your book. The one thing that I want you to consider as you're trying to determine your social media is both where is your audience, but also what, I don't know, I'm assuming that your book is adult as opposed to new adult or young adult. But, and I mention this just because, we have the whole Harry Potter thing, which was fantasy paranormal mixed in. So you also want to consider the age range of your audience, but you could also go onto Instagram too. If you are already creating images, you could reuse these images across different social media platforms. It's not necessarily that you're repeating the same thing over and over again, but readers are going to come to your message. They're not all going to come to your message on the same platform, right? So, Instagram can be really engaging with the right images. Pinterest can be great because you can kind of, isolate them by various groups, and that's really fun. And, you can reuse them on Facebook, but I almost think, if I don't know what your success has been on Facebook, the algorithms keep changing, and it's getting quite a bit trickier to get success on there without running ads. But ads are becoming less productive because so many people are running them, right?
Yes.
So, in order to get that organic outreach, you have to really work at Facebook. And I think I think a lot of authors are going to start leaving Facebook this coming year because it's getting a little exhausting for people. Like I think Instagram has become this fun new little funky place to kind of experiment with. I think a lot of people are leaving Facebook and going to Instagram.
Right. And I know, Linda, that you asked about how to use Pinterest. And if you go to my website, socialmediajustforwriters.com, I have lots of posts on Instagram, and I have a little ebook as well, so you can find there. So I hope that answers your question on that. So I know you talked about Um, so this is my next question. You've sort of touched on some of the answers, but I'll just ask it anyway. Not to put you too much on the spot, but what might a social media strategy look like, for example, for a historical fiction author?
Well, um, again, for historical fiction, I tend to really like I tend to stay off Twitter really for it. I like using Pinterest for that because you keep in mind that your reader, if they're reading historical fiction, they really like the intense historical elements that are part of your book. So breaking those down in such a way is going to be really, really interesting for them. You can also do that on Facebook if you have something that's really interesting historically. You can definitely do that on Facebook and share that. But you're going to want to be on there every single day. With Pinterest, one of the things that I really like about it is that the posts never really age. So on Facebook, your posts roll off of your page and then people actually have to go searching for them. On Pinterest, they're all kind of right there. And the same thing really could be said for Instagram too, because if somebody clicks on your profile, they can see all of your posts. So there seems to be a little bit more longevity for it. But anything with images, so clothing, things that are not as in the news or in the media in terms of your, the period that your book is set, I think is really interesting. Character descriptions. I think that I had one author who actually did like a day in the life of this particular character outside of the book, because the historical people really just eat that up. They eat up all of that detail of that history of, the making of the dresses and the cloth and that kind of stuff. So understand that your reader loves that detail, which is part of the reason that historicals tend to be longer too, because they really like that immersion. So the more that you can immerse them in that, the better. The same is true actually for science fiction readers, which is why a lot of sci-fi writers create actual worlds and then create elements in their social media to kind of bring the reader into that world.
Yeah, that's true. So, you talked about, ranking on Amazon, but
Mm-hmm.
talk about the types of factors that are important for ranking on Amazon.
So we talked about reviews. So reviews are important, but your keywords are also very important. And your keywords actually in your categories are probably most important. Now, Amazon, going back to the whole theory that Amazon is a search engine, right? As such, search engines, and those of you who have searched on Google, you know this, the more keywords that you type into the search bar, the closer that you are to a buy. So if I go into Google and I type in romance book, I'm probably not that really ready to buy a romance book. I'm just looking for romance books for whatever I'm doing, right? But if I go in there and I type holiday novella romance ebook, I'm about 99% ready to buy, right? And Google did a study on this and they found that that is absolutely true. And this is part of the reason why when you do that kind of lengthy search on Google and then you hop on to, let's say, Facebook, and then you start to see those creepy ads down the right-hand side where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just searched this and now here it is on the right-hand side. That's part of it. That's part of the algorithm. And Facebook knows this and Google knows this, right? Amazon knows this too. So think in terms of keyword strings, right? That's the first piece of this. But you don't have to know your keyword strings because Amazon's going to help you with this. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to go over to the Kindle store. I don't recommend just going to regular Amazon.com. Go over to the Kindle store specifically and start to type in whatever your book is about. So let's say it's historical, 1920s historical. So type that in, right, into your Amazon search bar. And Amazon will give you a list of drop-down suggestions. Very similar to Google, right, where they're sort of, where you think it's sort of their intuitive suggestions popping up. Take note of those suggestions and then go over to Amazon and pop those back into the search bar in the Kindle store and take a look at the amount of books in that keyword string and the search rank on each of the books. It's all about supply and demand. So you want to have very high demand and very little supply. At the top left-hand corner on the Amazon page, it'll show you how many books are in that particular search string. So one of, let's say, 5,000. That's a pretty decent number when you consider how many books are probably sitting in the Amazon system and how many books are published every day. But the next thing is you want to check the sales rank of the books. So see where the sales rank is, keeping in mind that 27,000 or less is considered the top 1% of Amazon. So, anything and if you're sitting in a really cluttered category, like if you're in contemporary romance, which is very, 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 very busy, you may go slightly higher with that sales rank number, but that's the general idea, is that you want to find the keyword string that supports the low the low supply but very high demand. The next thing is going to be your category. Now, when we put our books up onto Amazon, we were probably all asked for our BISAC categories, which are the book industry standard categories, right? And they're okay. They're used universally by bookstores and whatever, Costco, Walmart, yada, yada. But they're not very sexy, right? They're kind of not that creative. Amazon's taken that a step further. So on their Kindle side, on the Kindle bookstore side, you will see thousands and thousands and thousands of categories that you will never find in the BISAC category. This is why I tell authors, I don't care what your book is about, you have to have an ebook, because if you don't have an ebook, you won't have access to these really creative categories. And ideally what you're looking for is a category that doesn't have a lot of books in it. Again, you're looking for that low supply. Because the more visibility that you can get within a category, the higher up that your book goes in that category, the more the Amazon search engine will kick in, and the more your title will get boosted. So keywords and categories, and I imagine we may have some questions on that, which I'm more than happy to answer, because I know it gets a little bit confusing. But you don't have to be a keyword expert to do this. It will take you a little bit of time. I mean, I've been doing this now for several years, and it still takes me about 2 hours, sometimes more, to find the right keywords for a particular book, right. Only because I'm usually looking for between 7 and 10 keyword strings. Mm-hmm. Now, when you find these strings, try to, as best as you can, incorporate them into the book description. You can also go onto the back end of your Author Central page and enhance your book description with, the inside flap, note from the author, some more information about the book and that kind of a thing. This will help to adding keywords to that page as Amazon searches it will also help your book to come up higher. Did that make sense, Frances?
Yeah, it's really good information, Penny.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question. If a person writes different kinds of books, for example, manuals and miniseries and historicals, or mysteries, manuals and mysteries and historicals, how can those books help one another? How can one find superfans?
So the manuals aren't probably going to help your mysteries and your historicals, but your mysteries and historicals can help each other. But it depends a little bit too on, does the mystery also have historical elements? Because it's oftentimes hard. So when authors write across different genres, it's hard to get fans to cross over, right? And I have this saying where don't try to sell a puppy to a cat person, meaning that, if you're selling mysteries, historical, and there's no historical elements in it, historical people probably aren't going to buy those, right? So those fans tend to not cross over. Your manuals would really depend on what the manual's about, right? So not having that information is hard for me to answer. But it is harder to get crossover. What essentially you're doing is you're creating 3 different bases. So you have your manuals, you have your mysteries, and you have your historicals. And again, if your mysteries are historical based, then you have a crossover. But if they're not, then those are 2 separate segments, because very little crossover is going to happen there. And the same is true for anything. I had this conversation with another genre fiction author, and we were talking about, books that have paranormal elements and books that are, like, for example, contemporary romance versus, paranormal romance. So the contemporary people will rarely cross over to paranormal. Paranormal people will often cross over to contemporary. It's a very weird thing. So it depends a little bit on what the subgenre is, and if you want to share that, I'm happy to dig even further.
Yeah. So tell us how important Amazon ads are.
Well, Amazon Ads kind of interesting, right? Because they launched this year. I mean, really launched, took it out of beta this year. So it was a pretty cool thing to sort of experiment with. Amazon ads are really important, but I'm going to tell you a couple of secrets behind Amazon ads so you're not wasting a lot of money. So first you want to start with, and I'm going to say something, and I hope not everybody hangs up on this call, 400 keywords. However, I'm going to make this really easy. This is a much easier process than finding the keywords for your book. What you're going to do is you're going to find similar authors to yours. And actually on our blog, I have a blog post talks about the Amazon ads, how to do the Amazon ads. You can do a quick search on my website and find it. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to find similar authors and similar book titles. And all your ads are going to be, all the ad keywords are just going to be author names and book titles, author names and book titles. Take an Excel spreadsheet, because that's an easy way to make sure that, because Excel will tell you if you're duplicating names or whatever. And if you have one author who has, for example, 60 books, I would grab her name and then all 60 books, right? And if you're sitting in a market where an author's writing multiple titles, which happens a lot in genre fiction, you really only need 5 or 6 authors to fill out that 400 keyword list. The next thing that you want to do is you want to spend no more than 25 cents per click and $10 a day. And as your ads start to evolve, as they start to show up, you just want to watch that dashboard. And then generally what I do is I will invest more in ads that are actually selling, and I will pause ads that are costing me money but aren't selling anything. And usually with 400 keywords, I wind up only watching 10, which I know sounds kind of ridiculous after I spent all this time, but the 400 keywords really only takes me about an hour. I mean, now that I'm like, boom, 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 okay, I found the authors, I found things, because it's not an exact science, and at some point you may decide to just refresh it and add 100 more, names to it, which is completely fine. You can add, keywords to it at any time that you want. But the ads really, they do quite well. Here's the other kicker though. If your book is in Amazon, if your book is genre fiction and it's in Kindle Unlimited, it does even better with the ads. So I've had moderate success with nonfiction. I have my own books in Amazon ads for nonfiction, and I really don't spend, I mean, if I spend $30 a month on Amazon ads for my own books, but they don't have as big a pull as the genre fiction. And this is even for literary fiction, so it's not just mystery, romance, yada, yada, yada. Literary fiction, any of that, that kind of stuff, the ads tend to do really well. Children's books do really well. So the ads are really fun, and I recommend if you've got some time during the holiday break, go on there and just experiment with it. I mean, the most it can cost you is $10 a day to give it a shot, right? But I've been able to, along with the algorithm work that we do, I've been able to keep books in the top 1% of Amazon for a pretty long time. So it's a great tool. It's not available, and I have actually an email into Amazon to find out why that is and to see if we can get that changed. But it's not available to traditionally published authors, which is weird. Yeah, so.
As well.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see if I can get that changed.
Yeah, you see. So I guess the time has come for you to tell everyone about your business and how they can reach you.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you. So we have, so my business is Author Marketing Experts, and the website is amarketingexpert.com. We also have a buy one, get one promotion going on right now for my Amazon, How to Sell Books by the Truckload on Amazon. And you can find that information on our Facebook page, which is Facebook/TheRealBookGal. And yeah, and you're welcome to reach out to me at penny@amarketingexpert.com if you have any additional questions. But it's and our blog has a lot of information too. So if you want to just peruse that for a while and take a look at the Amazon ads article and whatnot, it's a really great time to be an author. And one of the things I'm doing a Facebook video this week for our folks, and it's very easy to focus on the stuff that's not working. So my ads aren't working, or I'm not getting reviews, or I'm not making book sales. But one of the things that I would really encourage you to do between now and the end of the year is make a list of what did work for you in 2017. Because focusing on what worked is not just empowering, but it will also help to kind of make a path for what you're going to do for 2017. So 2018 rather. So I would really encourage you all to focus on what's working and do more of that. And you know, stuff doesn't work. We try stuff, and that's awesome that we tried it. But not everything that I do works. God knows. So, you know.
Well, it's been wonderful having you, Penny, and I'm grateful for everyone who attended the webinar. And come back in January. Sharon Hamilton, who is the top-selling romance writer, will be here. So signing off, this is Frances Caballo with Social Media Just for Writers, and I look forward to seeing everybody next month. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.